Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's noon now, so we'll get things rolling. Welcome to the webinar. This is preparing for EAB Grants Program and AmeriCorps Informational webinar. So we're going to hear from a number of folks today, including starting off with Jonathan Osthus from the MDA, who will be our in-house EAB guru for this afternoon and tell us about why managing for EAB is so important. We'll then hear from Emma Schultz with Minnesota DNR, who will tell us about the newest grant funding round that's been just opened, about 1.6 million available. And then after that, we're going to transition to hearing from a couple of different folks who help manage AmeriCorps programs here in Minnesota. Christina Villela with the Green Corps program, and Dylan Kelly with the Community Forestry Corps program and Climate Corps. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Jonathan. Please keep yourself muted. We all can speak, but if everyone could keep their mics on mute while the presentations are going on, and then we'll take questions as we go and also at the end. So with that, I'm going to give it to Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Can everybody see the presentation all right?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jonathan Osthus with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. I work in the Plant Protection Division, and I'm the Emerald Ash Borer Technical Assistance Coordinator for the MDA. And so I'm tasked with tracking the spread of emerald ash borer throughout the state of Minnesota, and also provide technical help to communities once they have an emerald ash borer infestation. So I'm gonna just talk briefly about why it's important to manage emerald ash borer. So right now you can see this is MDA's emerald ash borer status map. So this map's available on the Minnesota Department of Ag's EAB webpage. You can see at that link on the right. And so this is updated nightly with new infested tree locations. And so with those new infested tree locations, we also have a generally infested polygon that we place around those known infested tree points to try to more accurately capture where emerald ash borer is in the state. So right now you can see we have 30 counties that have active EAB infestations, but you also notice that there's a number of counties where a good chunk of them still yet to see any EAB damage. So it's just one thing important to note, and it's continuing to build in the state, but so far most of it's been in the southern half. All the data that goes into this map is also available at the Geospatial Commons to download if you'd like that. So just to look at the DNR's rapid assessment of ash in Minnesota from 2010, it really shows you that we have a large ash resource in the state with nearly 1 billion ash trees, large swaths of black ash forest in north central Minnesota, and then really importantly, in the western part of the state, in many communities, they have anywhere from 30 to 60% ash that make up the community forest. So there's really this large resource that's at stake here. And it's important to manage it and slow the spread of emerald ash borer. So here's a neat little tool that is available for communities. If you have an inventory and tree ratings, you can plug them right in, and you can kind of see what the total benefit of your trees are in your community. So it kind of helps you put a dollar amount to what that tree resource is worth. And it can help you make decisions on whether you would prefer to treat or remove when you're dealing with emerald ash borer and managing it in your community. It's helpful. It's something to put a value at and maybe help with your discussions with city council and things like that when you're trying to negotiate a budget. So emerald ash borer, how it kills trees. So when it's first found in an area, there's this lag time from when it's found into when that population begins to build and to when you start to see a lot of trees die in a short amount of time. So the goal of active emerald ash borer management is to kind of lengthen out that curve and flatten it somewhat so that that the rate at which trees die is over a longer period of time, so that it's spreading out the removal costs over a longer period of time. And maintaining more mature, healthy trees on the landscape for a longer period of time. So gaining value on both of those ends. And so if we look at what Minnesota is at, right now we're a little bit above that 50% of the national average. So we are doing quite a bit better than most other states in the country. So if we were to go at 100% of the national average, by the year 2030, we would have emerald ash borer infestations in every county in the state. So by keeping this lower spread rate, we are saving money and saving community resources. So just to put that in kind of a perspective, by going at that slower spread rate, you'll see if you say you're at about 60%, you could save up to $1.5 billion over the next 20 years of dealing with emerald ash borer. So the slower the spread rate we can keep, the more benefits are kept on the landscape, cleaning our air, helping with stormwater runoff, increasing property value, reduce cooling costs in the summertime, and then reduced removal costs over that period of time as well to deal with the dead and dying trees. So it really is important and can save a lot of money and can help a lot of communities by doing active management of emerald ash borer. The Department of Ag came up with these helpful guidelines to manage and slow the growth and spread of emerald ash borer. This is a very comprehensive document that goes through all the steps that a community needs to take to manage emerald ash borer. If you haven't looked at it before, I highly suggest going through it. There's a wealth of resources in there and links to other information that can be helpful, especially when you're building your community's emerald ash borer management plan. So if you're a community that has yet to make an emerald ash borer management plan, please go through this document. It's available on the Minnesota Department of Ag's website. It's about a 34-page document. It's very easy to read, and I highly suggest going through that when you're coming up with your management plan. Some things to keep in mind, priorities change as your situation changes. So when you are yet to have an emerald ash borer infestation, so uninfested area, the most important steps are to do early detection and reporting of infestations and planning. So that's the best point at which you can come up with a plan. So to know what your resources are in your community, so you have it ready to go once emerald ash borer is found. So once you're infested, it's good to focus on treating high value trees and removing known infested trees during the non-flight season and focusing on those management tactics. And then once your community is at the point where emerald ash borer populations are extremely high and you have lots of tree mortality, it's important at that point to switch over to trying to minimize wood movement out of the area, dealing with hazard trees and utilizing whatever wood you can. So it's going to change over time as you deal with emerald ash borer. And really the solution is to know what you have and what your target is. So the planning and inventory are key aspects, and then monitoring early on, and then executing the plan, having funding for your city forestry department, and really kind of putting these plans into action. So know what you have, know what your target is. There's many different options you have to make a successful emerald ash borer plan. Try to have dedicated funds because they are going to be needed as those costs increase as emerald ash borer moves through a community. And it's really important to communicate early and often with residents to help gain buy-in. So that is really the quick and dirty of why it's important to manage emerald ash borer. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me at the email or number below. I will also mention that the MDA will be holding emerald ash borer field workshops in the month of March. So there's 5 or 6 locations around the state where I'll be holding free hour-long sessions at most often parks where there's standing infested trees, and we'll go over emerald ash borer early detection, management, and we'll dig into some standing infested trees so you can have a kind of a firsthand look at what it looks like. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Emma to talk about the grant that is available.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. All right, how's that looking?
Looks good.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, hi everyone. My name is Emma Schultz. I'm the Community Forest Project Specialist with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And I'd like to talk to you today about our last guaranteed round of funding that we have to offer for 2022. So the Urban and Community Forestry team at DNR can provide a variety of assistance statewide, and notably we provide grants to local units of government for community forest management. The eligible activities that we're able to fund through these programs is really dependent on where our funding comes from. So depending on our funding source, we can fund public inventories, ash management plans with an EAB component, tree removals, tree plantings, and or chemical treatment of ash. It's important to note that to date, all funding we have received has been for activities on public land only. So at this point, we are unable to fund projects proposing to do work on private land. Our grants are competitive, which means that our applications are evaluated according to set criteria. And those criteria are made available as part of our request for applications so that you know what you will be scored on if you're submitting an application. The 2022 Preparing for EAB Grants, here's a quick overview. You may remember we had the same program that we could offer in 2021. The legislature allocated funding for 2 years. So this is the second year of funding for this program. So the DNR welcomes applications from local units of government within Minnesota that assist communities in managing ash for emerald ash borer on public land, with $1.6 million available in general and heritage enhancement account funds to fund 2-year projects. No minimum dollar amount is required. The maximum amount that will be funded is $150,000. And applications must include a 25% match of total project funds. Match can be in kind, cash, or both. So if you recently applied for our other grant program, the Protect Community Forests program, you would have noticed that there was no required match. However, due to the funding source here, a 25% match is required for this grant. In terms of who's eligible to apply, all local units of government within Minnesota are eligible. This includes all cities, all counties, all regional authorities, joint powers boards, towns, tribes, and park and recreation boards in cities of the first class. And we have a number of priorities in terms of funding. So priority will be given to projects that remove and replace ash trees posing significant public safety concerns. So that would be ash trees that would be located in boulevards or manicured spaces of parks as compared to natural spaces. Projects that benefit underserved populations and areas of concern for environmental justice. And we reference the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's environmental justice map for this, which includes communities with higher populations of low-income residents or people of color, including tribal communities, or both. And we ask that grant applicants describe how the proposed project activities benefit these communities. Lastly, priority will be given to communities who have staff, who plan to certify their staff during the grant period, or who will contract with companies with staff with either a degree in a related field or professional tree care credentials, such as Minnesota Tree Inspector, ISA certified arborist, etc. Eligible project expenses for the 2022 Preparing for EAB Grant Program are expenses incurred through project activities that are directly related and necessary to produce outcomes described in your application. So grant funds can be used for professional contracts for assistance or project implementation by individuals or organizations who are not a part of your local unit of government. So this could be for public tree inventories, ash management plans, tree removal and replanting, or standalone tree planting projects. Grant funds can also be used for site prep and planting, including mulch, watering bags, staking materials, and tree wraps and/or guards. It can be used for equipment purchases less than $5,000 used to complete the project if it's demonstrated that this equipment is necessary to do the work, or for equipment rental. It can cover gravel bed construction as well as the purchase of trees for diversity. Perhaps more importantly to you as you're considering putting an application in would be ineligible project expenses. So unlike the most recent grant we offered, this grant program cannot fund the chemical treatment of ash that is ineligible for funding. It could be used as match funds though. Also ineligible for funding include costs incurred prior to the start date on your grant agreement. Grants have to be signed and in place before work can begin. And then most important for many communities, staff time for local government unit employees is not an eligible expense and cannot be reimbursed. We also don't fund the purchase of trees listed on the Minnesota invasive terrestrial plants list. You'll see that list of trees here. We don't fund the purchase of bald and burlap trees or containerized trees larger than 20 gallon or bigger trees greater than 2-inch caliper diameter. We don't fund the purchase of tree species that already make up 10% or more of your community's public trees. And if you don't have a current or updated public tree inventory, we do rely on the 2010 rapid assessment from which that graph of ash trees John pulled from in his presentation. And so that is an estimate of both the public and private trees within your community. And if you don't have an inventory, we utilize that to say what you may have that may be making up more than 10%, may be overpopulated in your community already, to encourage you to plant a diversity of species going forward. We don't fund the purchase of plants such as shrubs, living ground covers, sod, grass seed, and flowers. No purchase of land or easements, no major soil or grade changes or construction. That would include large amounts of dirt or tree grates. We don't fund equipment purchases equal to or exceeding $5,000. Although if you want to split up a more expensive piece of equipment between grant funds and match funds, that may be considered. We don't fund the purchase of meals or snacks or experimental practices not approved by DNR. In terms of grant review, all of our grants are reviewed by a steering committee, which is made up of DNR forestry staff, Department of Agriculture staff, and select knowledgeable stakeholders. They review all applications that are received by the deadline, and they recommend projects and award amounts. DNR then takes their recommendations and is responsible for final award decisions. So this grant program was released January 25th. Application questions are due by February 22nd. This is mostly to make sure that they can be put on the website so that everyone has equal chance to see the question that you may be asking. Do feel free to continue asking application-specific questions after that deadline. Applications are due on March 4th. After that, there's a 3-week period during which the grant review committee will review and score applications and then meet to decide on projects. All applicants will be notified by March 28th whether or not they will receive funding, and then it is our hope that grants will be in place starting July 1st. So funding arrives July 1st for this program and runs for 2 years. So as you're preparing an application, you can utilize July 1st as your anticipated start date for your projects. Here's what a grant looks like. If you obtain a grant through us, we start with that request for applications. You submit your application, and then hopefully you are selected as a grantee. At that point, your contract is developed, and it has to go back and forth for 3 signatures between DNR and your local unit of government. Depending on the community, that contract may have to be brought before City Council for a signature, but that's not anything we require on our end. That's on your end. After the 3rd and final signature, the contracts are considered fully executed or fully signed, and that's when grant work can begin. Over the lifetime of the grant, depending on how long the program is, you will have the opportunity to periodically request for reimbursement. So for all of our programs, you front the costs and then you request reimbursement by showing the work that has been completed. With that proof of completed work, we will perform a compliance check to make sure that everything has been done according to standards. Trees have been planted appropriately and correctly. And once we verify that, we will issue a partial payment. That can cycle back however many times you need in order to expend all of your grant funds until you have fully completed the project, you have met all of your objectives that you said you would meet, and you submit your final grant report. Another compliance check will be done. If it's a larger scale project of $50,000 or more, we'll do a final monitoring visit to make sure that everything ran smoothly. Then we'll issue a final payment and your grant will be closed out. Now, it's important to note that we reimburse up to 90%, and then that final 10% is retained until the project is completed. So if you, for example, spend all your grant funds, but have to still show match funding that you've committed to providing through this program, that final 10% will be retained until you show that you've expended those match funds. These are the reimbursement reporting deadlines for this specific grant program. We've got one December of this year, 2 next year. And then by June 28th of 2024, all project work must be completed. And the final request for reimbursement, along with all final reports, must be submitted. As I mentioned, the scoring criteria are made available at the end of the request for applications, and this is what the steering committee uses to review each application. It's on a 100-point scale, and I strongly encourage applicants to score their own applications using the score sheet that's provided before submitting the application. This will give you an idea of if you're fully addressing the question and how the reviewers will read your application. So I'll go through the scoring criteria. They are the same, except for a couple of bullet points as the other recent grant that we offered. The first criteria is the project overview and need. The application is clear and complete. The community has a readiness to take on a project of the proposed scope and size, and the project focuses on significant public safety concerns. The scoring criteria accounts for 1/4 of the total number of points. The second criteria is the project timeline. The timeline provides specific dates for all activities. The timeline is easy to read and comprehend, and it follows the best management practice of not removing ash trees when EAB are actively flying, so no summer removals between May and September. That criteria is worth 20 points or 1/5 of the total. The third criteria is the project budget and budget explanation. This is a combination of a budget attachment spreadsheet as well as a budget question within the application to go into further detail about that spreadsheet. So the budget explanation provides specific dollar amounts for anticipated use. The budget totals equal the amount that's requested. The costs are financially realistic and effective, and the project seeks to replant more trees than removed. We do require projects to be replaced on a 1-to-1, but this criteria shows that, if you attempt to do more than 1-to-1, you may be prioritized there. And I would just add on to this that there is a cover page on the application that also asks for some project totals. Make sure that that is filled out as well and that it matches your budget. It's a common mistake that we see. The fourth criteria is the project impacts on priority populations. We are mandated by the state in our grant making to include a priority population component, and so this is ours. The planning and collaboration clearly serves and includes areas of concern for environmental justice. As I mentioned before, this could include communities with higher populations of low-income residents or people of color, including tribal communities or both. Communities and areas of concern are engaged and their input is incorporated prior to project implementation and through the project. And the applicant demonstrates actionable items for these communities. So for example, program focal areas, outreach offered in multiple languages or added inclusion. And the impacts on the diverse populations are clear and tangible. So we're looking for applicants to put an effort in to address these communities rather than just mentioning them on the application form. And we do from time to time have communities that choose other sources to cite. Perhaps they don't have any areas of concern listed on the MPCA map, but they will turn to other sources such as EJ Screen or other census data that they have, and they will work to address those communities in that way. The fifth scoring criteria is communications. Communication strategies are directly related to project accomplishments or activities or both, and multiple forms of communication are listed with potential to reach the public. And Emerald Ash Borer related messaging is included in those communications, which is designed to slow the spread. You saw in John's presentation how helpful it can be for cash-strapped municipalities to slow the spread and that therefore spread out budgetary needs over time. Lastly, key personnel. All key personnel are listed with their corresponding project roles. Any and all certifications and educational degrees are listed for staff or contractors. And this would include, if someone has a degree that's in a completely separate field, please list it anyway. It shows attention to the question. So a high scoring community will have staff or contractors with a degree in a related field, or a combination or multiple staff with ISA certified arborists, TCIA accreditations, or both. And really, we're just looking to see that you put in care and attention into your application. And if you do that, that gives you the best chance of scoring well and receiving funding. So it's pretty simple, but check your spelling. Ask someone to read the application over for you. Make sure that you're calculating your match funding correctly. Make sure you're calculating your math correctly. And then please ask. If something is confusing or unclear, please ask me. I'm here to help, at least for the next couple of days or weeks until I go out on maternity leave, and then my coworkers will be here to help. So a couple more tips for application quality. Please do your best to present a polished and effective application. We are meeting you often for the first time through your application. And so putting together something that is professional and it puts your best foot forward gives you the best chance of receiving funding. If your application is riddled with errors and it's hard to read, it's not going to come across as a strong application, and reviewers are likely to feel hesitant about funding it. Same goes for application where questions are only partially answered, or there's very short answers that don't go into detail about the project. So that's why outside eyes can be helpful. They can review the application and see where maybe you intended to put more in, but maybe didn't get to it. It also helps you recognize those scoring criteria that I went over. And lastly, there may not be much of an importance to technical terms. I would argue that there isn't, especially if you're a community who's looking to contract the work out. There's no need for you to fill your application with technical jargon. Plain language works just fine and can help to get the message across nicely. So if you have the time, and you may not, try to step away from your application for a few days and then reread it. And hopefully that allows you to evaluate your writing as you intend it to be read by the grant reviewers. I'd like to talk quickly about match funding. So some financial assistance requires recipients to demonstrate a contribution to total project costs. These are match funds. If it's not required, it's generally viewed as advantageous to contribute some portion of match funding to your project to show that you are dedicated to getting the work done. However, match funds, once they're a part of your project, must be reported on. So I would advise you to not go wild in submitting copious amounts of match, because you are going to have to report on it. And if you're removing trees or planting trees with those match funds, you're going to have to report on all of those things as well. And we will check that work to make sure it's been done. So there's two kinds of match funding: in-kind contributions and cash contributions. Cash contributions, or cash match, are direct project expenses that you contribute to a project as a local unit of government. And in-kind materials are services, materials, salaries, or wages that are used for the project, and or equipment or technical assistance that's provided by you or donated by a third party. And so accounting for cash match is pretty straightforward. It just involves invoices very similar to your requests for reimbursement. It's a little bit more nebulous perhaps for in-kind match, but as long as you have great record keeping on your end, you'll be able to provide those in-kind match funds. And regardless of which kind of match funding you're providing, your match funds will be accepted through this grant program as long as they are verifiable on your end through record keeping, as long as they're not included for any other project or program, as long as they're necessary and directly related to the project itself, and as long as they're incurred within the grant period. So again, you have to wait until your grant is fully signed to begin work that includes match funds. A quick explanation of calculating match, since it's often calculated wrong. It's easy to understand a dollar for dollar match, but you can use these following formulas to calculate your required match funding if you have something other than a 50-50 match. So you'll take your grant funded money divided by your grant funded percent. That gives you your total project costs. And then your required match equals your total project costs minus that grant funded dollar amount. So for example, if you have $60,000 in grant funds and you are required to provide 25% match, you calculate your total project cost as 60,000 divided by 75%, because that $60,000 grant funds represents 75% of your total project costs. That gives you 80,000. And so your required match is 80,000 minus 60,000 or $20,000. The mistake that most people make would be to take 60,000 times 25%, but that would only give you 25% of the grant funds, not of the total project cost. So take your time and avoid those common mistakes. Make sure to calculate your match correctly. So it should be a percentage of your total project cost. And then make sure those match funds are added to your grant fund request so that your total project cost is summed, not considered a part of it. Match funds are a part of the total project cost. So with that, thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions when it's appropriate. And if there's no questions now, we can skip over to Christina.
Yeah, I would just say if there are folks who have lingering questions about either EAB or the grant program specifically, I would say now is a good time to ask those things. As we switch over, it's related in that AmeriCorps programs certainly can help your community, but the following parts of this presentation aren't directly related to the granting. Emma, I'll ask a question.
Sure.
In terms of the match, I guess
Yes.
thinking strategically,
Mm-hmm.
does it help to show a lot of match? Is it, if the communities say they're going to match at 100%, does that communicate like a strong commitment, or is that like, oh, this community actually doesn't need the funding? I'm just kind of wondering about the calculus and the strategy going into kind of setting up your match, and if that's considered at all.
Sure. So I would say that we don't prioritize the ability to match beyond that required amount. And if match is not required, we don't ask it of you, but because the legislature required it in statute, we are required to have 25% match met by all grantees. Now you can kind of suss out where that match is coming from when you review the budget. If it's in-kind salaries of city staff, that's understandable and may be needed to accomplish the project objectives. And so I'd say it definitely depends on how the project is structured, but no priority is given to more match, if that helps.
Yeah.
And I would say that, massive amounts of match would kind of signify, depending on where it's coming from, of course, but would kind of signify that the funds may or may not truly be needed.
And then also just the point that match funding does have to be reported on. And so.
Exactly. And it's so the more you report, the more work it is for you, which can get kind of hectic. I just had a direct question here. What would be an appropriate size tree that could be planted with this grant? So we fund up to 20-gallon containerized or up to 2-inch bare roots. So 3/4 or inch to 2-inch bare root trees are eligible for this program. And there are no species stipulations. beyond, either that invasive terrestrial plants list or trees that make up more than 10% in your community.
Let's see.
Emma, I have a quick question on the match. So
Sure.
if we purchased bald and burlap as our match, does that work? As like say, I had part of my grant was having certain trees removed, and then part of my match was the purchase of 2 bald and burlap trees per removal, and then use that as the match, or should I just show it as a cash induction into the grant, or how would you write that? Does that make sense?
You would be welcome to use those as match funds, just like, you could treat trees with some emamectin benzoate and use that as match funds as well. So that's not a grant eligible expense.
Okay.
Thing I would say is that if you are unable to get competitive pricing on the burlapped trees, and therefore overall are planning to plant fewer than a community that maybe have more competitive pricing on some bare root or containerized trees, the grant reviewers may notice that. They're very aware of costs and take that into consideration. However, it's prohibited to do that with match funds.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I'm just going to clarify, it sounded like maybe your internet cut out right at the end there, Emma, that it's not prohibited.
Not prohibited.
Yep, great.
As long as it's match funding, yep.
Yep, and that was clear in your answer. I just wanted to confirm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Has any other questions that come up? Feel free to ask them at any time here.
There is a question about the recording, and it is being recorded, and it will be posted at our UMN U4 YouTube page. I just put a link there into the chat. So please check that out. Oh, I sent that right to Dylan.
And we'll work to get it on the grant page website as well. Last time I also put a PDF of John and mine's presentations on there as well, if that's helpful for folks. So thank you. All right, if there's no more questions, Christina can jump on up to speak about Minnesota Green Corps.
Absolutely, thank you, Emma. All right, are you seeing my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Excellent, thank you. Well, hello everyone, my name is Christina. I'm with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and today I'm speaking on behalf of the Minnesota Green Corps program to share a bit about another resource that aligns quite well with some of the funding that you just heard about. First, in general, the Minnesota Green Corps program is an AmeriCorps program. It is coordinated by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and the goal is that the program is designed to help preserve and protect Minnesota's environment while training a new generation of environmental professionals. So the Green Corps program started back in 2009. So the current program year that's operating right now is the 13th consecutive year of the Green Corps program. We've grown over time from starting with about 17 sites and members each year to now we have about 50 sites and members each year. If you're not familiar with AmeriCorps, it is a network of local, state, and national service programs that connects more than 80,000 Americans each year in intensive service to meet our country's critical needs, which of course includes the environment. The general gist of our Minnesota Green Corps program is that Minnesota Green Corps selects host sites or organizations and places members or individuals with those organizations all across the state each year. Members work to improve the environment and strengthen communities while gaining green job skills and networking with environmental professionals. For this upcoming program year, We will have 46 AmeriCorps member positions available for host sites all across the state of Minnesota. The Minnesota Green Corps program is an 11-month AmeriCorps service term. So our program operates from September through August each year. And the members do make a full-time service commitment. So these are individuals that serve about 40 hours per week. In total, it's a 1,700-hour service term over that 11-month term. Our members, our projects are all aligned kind of in one of 4 project areas. One that might draw your attention most is on the right-hand side, our green infrastructure improvements track, which aligns quite well with forestry and stormwater initiatives. The organizations or the host sites that partner with the Minnesota Green Corps program include government entities, school districts, 501c3 nonprofit organizations, and not-for-profit institutions of higher education. So for-profit businesses are not eligible as host sites. Just to note that Minnesota Green Corps host sites range, of course, in size. We partner with large government entities that might have hundreds or thousands of employees. And we also partner with small nonprofit organizations, which may have 1 to 3 employees. So it's just really critical that our host sites have at least 1 full-time paid employee to support their Minnesota Green Corps member. Host sites do not pay a fee to participate in the Green Corps program. Host sites do provide in-kind match. So for the Minnesota Green Corps program, that's in the form of kind of 2 main pieces. One is supervision time. So as I previously noted, an organization or a host site must have at least 1 full-time paid employee. That employee would be the supervisor, kind of providing day-to-day support of their Minnesota Green Corps member. And that supervisor must contribute an average of about 4 hours per week, or about 10% of their time to support the member and the projects. As a host site, the requirement of in-kind is also in the form of operating cost. And that's really just to provide the member with what they need to be most successful. So I mentioned the service commitment is about a 40-hour per week commitment from the member. So they do need a dedicated office space, computer, internet and telephone usage, accessibility for people with disabilities. And then also, given that we are a professional development program, the Minnesota Green Corps program also requires that host sites provide approximately $300 in member training opportunities. So essentially that's to cover registration fees for the member attending conferences or trainings or webinars or other events that support the member's professional development and help advance the projects. Some sample project activities and most closely aligned with our green infrastructure improvements track align quite well with some of the EAB funding opportunities that you heard earlier. So members do things like conducting public tree inventories. Green Corps members help develop and update community forest management plans or EAB management plans, invasive species management plans. Members coordinate community tree removal, replacement, and plantings. They identify and implement community forestry best practices on public lands. Members identify and implement green infrastructure best practices. Members provide community outreach, education, and guidance about the benefits of forestry and green infrastructure practices. These are just a handful amongst many potential project activities that members can do. One note is to align with the Minnesota Green Corps performance measures. So if you were to consider the Minnesota Green Corps program, you'd see in our application materials that we have a lengthy list of potential performance measures that a host site can align with. And really it's just required that a host site project align with at least one of our measures. So it's essentially just the opportunity for the member and the host site to report some measurable metrics associated with the work that the member does. Some of those include things like reducing nutrient pollution, improving public lands, and that could be through things like removing invasive species or planting trees. It can also be educating individuals, mobilizing or engaging volunteers, And then we certainly have, likewise, like the funding you previously heard about, the Green Corps program also prioritizes engagement of areas of environmental justice concern. A few project examples of some of our host sites. I wanted to highlight that align well here. So the city of Lakeville, for example, has a member that's providing EAB community education and engaging property owners about canopy preservation, providing resources to develop a management plan. The members assisting with preparing for the ash removal project. They're helping expand canopy cover in city parks through planting initiatives. The members inspecting and collecting data on city stormwater ponds to determine the health and condition of trees. And the members auditing tree removal and pruning work on public property and updating records. So you can gather from this that typically Green Corps members have anywhere from 3 to 4 or 5 main project areas, and they kind of accompany that with other smaller supplemental work as well. It's a good fit knowing that a Green Corps member has a full-time 40-hour-a-week commitment. Another example is that we're partnered with the city of Marshall as a host site. They have a Minnesota Green Corps member that's conducting tree inventory in parks and public areas. That member's inputting the information into the city's database, noting specifics such as tree size, tree condition and health, etc. The members planning and implementing an Arbor Day celebration, adoptive park cleanups, and community tree planting events. The members helping to develop the ash tree replacement program and educating community residents about EAB and engaging and mobilizing volunteers. And the members presenting information on environmental stewardship to local elementary schools and community members. So you can gather from these examples, there's a wide variety of activities that Minnesota Green Corps members can support within a wholesale organization. There are some restrictions in the activities that Minnesota Green Corps members can be involved in, given that we're an AmeriCorps program and federally funded. Minnesota Green Corps members have some restrictions labeled as prohibited service activities. I highlighted a few that sometimes are relevant. Really, an AmeriCorps member cannot support attempting to influence legislation or engaging or organizing any type of protests or petitions. And then another notable one is that member activities may not include assisting organizations with meeting requirements or coming into compliance or avoiding fines. So if this is something that sounds like it might be a good fit, this is a wonderful time. Our Minnesota Green Corps wholesale application is open and available currently. Application materials are available on the MPCA's website that you see on your screen. There's also an email account there that you can address questions to. Our host site application materials are all on our website. They include a host site application guide, which is a really comprehensive document that outlines what the Green Corps experience is like for a member, for a host site, and what the application process includes. Then there's an actual host site application form. Admittedly, it's a pretty a small document. It's just a 3 to 4 page document. It's been condensed a bit for those who may have participated in previous years. And really, this is an opportunity for you as an applicant to outline what kind of activities that you envision your member doing, what are some potential measurable metrics that might be associated with those activities, and how your organization is willing and able to support a Minnesota Green Corps member. On the website, we also have some really great tools and resources to support your application. So we have a few sample work plans that really help outline what a Green Corps member's full 11-month work plan might look like. And we also have a sample host site agreement. If you are selected as a host site, you would enter an agreement with the MPCA to host that Green Corps member. There's a sample document of that on our website. So kind of, if you are considering an application, just a recap of some main takeaways. To be eligible, you'd need to be a government entity, school district, 501c3 nonprofit organization, or a not-for-profit institution of higher education. Must have at least one full-time paid employee, and that individual that would be the supervisor, and they're committing kind of an average of about 4 hours per week to support the member and the member's projects. The organization must have a dedicated office space and be able to provide the member with some resources like a computer or project needs, and be willing to support the member's training as a professional development program. Also, we need to align with at least one performance measure. So that was the metrics piece, kind of the ability to calculate and measure some reduced nutrient pollution, improving public lands, educating individuals, something along those lines. And then also just to note that it is an 11-month full-time commitment. So it is an individual there as a Green Corps member day to day, supporting this work and kind of having a full-time commitment from September through August. A few tips if you are considering an application. Our applications that typically have 3 or 4 primary projects and some supplementary activities are most successful. That really helps ensure that the members continuously have work to do to fill that 40-hour work week, projects that they can feel ownership of and a sense of accomplishment when they're complete. We do have a primary focus on public lands to be treated and improved, and a marginal focus on supporting private land efforts. If you are applying for the EAB grant, something to note is that you'll want to document in your Minnesota Green Corps application that you've done that. And the reasoning is that proposed projects cannot rely on pending funding. So as an applicant for a Minnesota Green Corps member, you'd want to specify in your application and kind of define how the member project would be carried out if those funds are not received. If your projects are kind of EAB or forestry focused, again, they'd likely align with our green infrastructure improvements track. So as I noted, the application materials are available on our MPCA website and the Minnesota Green Corps page, and our wholesale application form is due on March 22nd. So currently open and due on March 22nd. There's an email address in front of you and a link to the site, and I can pop them in the chat box. Again, my name is Christina Valella. I'm the program coordinator. My colleague Candace also supports the green infrastructure work, and our email addresses are on the screen in front of you, and we're happy to address any questions you might have. Thank you very much for that, and I'll pass it over to Dylan, I believe, next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. And nice to meet everybody. My name is Dylan Kelly. I'm Director of Climate Programs with AMPACT. I will get my screen shared here in just 1 second and get things started. Can I get a reaction button from somebody if you're able to see that screen?
How about a reaction?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So as I said, name's Dylan Kelly, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Climate Impact Corps, in particular our community forestry initiative of Climate Impact Corps. So to get us started, Climate Impact Corps is an initiative of AMPACT. AMPACT's a nonprofit that operates in the state of Minnesota as well as several other states, harnessing the power of public service for AmeriCorps service. A lot of people will recognize us from 2 of our largest programs, which would be Reading Corps and Math Corps. Reading Corps has been around since 2003, and that's kind of how the organization initiated. We now have several different programs that include education programs, as I mentioned, but also programs in areas like recovery and homelessness, and more recently in the last couple of years, climate change and supporting the different aspects of that work. So as I mentioned, community forestry is one that we've had for about 2 years now, and pretty excited to be moving into that space. So community forestry in action. We have currently 19 sites across the state of Minnesota. And at those 19 sites, we have 22 members serving. So we have a few sites that actually have 2 members that are supporting them. We have rural, suburban, urban sites, both city governments, municipalities, parks districts, as well as nonprofits. Places as large as the city of Minneapolis and as small as the city of Ely. So we're kind of in all corners of the state doing lots of different work. And we promote that collaboration. I think that's one of the coolest things about a program like this is members provide those links to other municipalities, other organizations, and provide those connections that allow new ideas to be fostered. Main work that happens is we're increasing tree canopy in communities through things like tree inventories, getting out there and planting trees. Members are building and maintaining gravel beds, developing and implementing emerald ash borer management plans, which is one of the reasons we're here today, and engaging communities in stewardship activities, learning activities, and outreach activities. And I was excited to see Benjamin, one of our members, is actually on the call today. So Benjamin's there in that picture on the right-hand side. And Benjamin, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and just introducing yourself a little bit, where you're working, and give us an idea of some of the work that you're doing at your site.
Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin. I'm with the city of Brooklyn Park. And some of my responsibilities so far this year have been doing EAB communication and awareness with our community residents, tree inventory, doing some forestry policy revisions, helping out with forestry website updates and tree planting events. And it's been a really great opportunity to gain skills and experience with environmental preservation and conservation, while being able to help contribute with the management efforts with our forestry department.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Benjamin. It's great to have you share a little bit. So when you think collective impacts, again, we have 22 members across the state. Since this year, this service year, I should say, which started at the beginning of September, we have over 14,000 trees that have been inventoried, over 1,600 trees that have been planted across the state, and 27 community events that have been held. And that's just to this point. We're expecting, as we head back into the planting season next spring, and start holding, those big events like Arbor Day events, we'll see that impact continue to grow. So we'll talk a little bit about member and host site experience. Member experience, it's a great training and professional development opportunity. We're lucky to have our forestry training and support provided by Chad Giblin from City Forester and Karen Zumak from Tree Trust. You can see Chad in there doing a tree ID training that happened earlier this year in January for some of our members that started in January. We also do diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and specifically with that climate justice angle. Great networking opportunities to be connecting with people across the state. We ask that all members complete the Minnesota Tree Inspector course. And then of course, site-based training, right? They're at your site and they're working with you in your cities in order to learn and implement the program there. Benefits, members receive a stipend of $1,100 every 2 weeks. That's for a full-time 40-hour per week position. We also provide 100% premium paid health insurance, $150 gear allowance in order to help support purchasing the clothing that's needed to be out doing work on a day like today. A $6,495 Siegel Education Award on completion of the program that can be used to pay previous loans or for future schooling as well. And a federal student loan forbearance while in the program. And if they complete the full 11-month commitment, then any interest that may have been accumulated during that period is paid by the program. Let's talk a little bit about site expectations. So it's very similar to what you would have heard from Christina with Minnesota Green Corps. The kind of the heart of it is the host site supervisor who is providing mentorship as well as some of that management around things like hours and support. We do ask for a workspace to be provided and kind of general office equipment that's needed in order to do the work at the site. We ask for support in recruitment. We found that when host sites really support that recruitment effort and are able to identify somebody from their own community, oftentimes that member has more sense of place, more energy around supporting that, and already has some of the connections in place that are needed to do really great community development work like what we're asking them to do with forestry. We ask that the sites provide ongoing professional support and that they support data collection so that we can understand what is that collective impact that I mentioned before of doing this community forestry work across the state. Host site benefits. The biggest one is capacity and energy, right? This is having an AmeriCorps member lets you get to projects that have maybe just felt just out of reach because of that human resource capacity. And there's an energy that members bring, right? An excitement to be doing the work. And we hear that about new energy and new ideas coming out as being one of the greatest benefits that host sites receive. We do offer 40-hour per week and 25-hour per week positions. Generally, we say the preference is 40 hours per week if the work is there, just because then members have it as a full-time role and are able to focus on it. However, we do offer 25-hour per week positions if that is of interest. It's an 11-month commitment. We do accept applications on a rolling basis. They are open right now. Another big benefit is member-initiated collaboration. As I said, members share, they're on a Discord together, so they're communicating with each other all the time about different ideas and different projects that are going on. And we've heard from a lot of sites that that's a huge benefit because it's a natural network of communication for different sites throughout the state to be hearing from each other about how different methods that are being used to accomplish the work that we know needs to be done. And finally, we also do have no site fee. And there's a streamlined process for returning sites. So once you've been selected as a site the first year, in following years, if you'd like a member, again, we have a very streamlined process where it's not a full application. It happens before applications are released. And you basically indicate your interest in continuing this ongoing partnership with us and what your hope is for support for the following year. So a nice streamlined process for sites that way. How to apply? Go to ampact.us/community forestry, and I will go ahead and drop that in the chat here. One second. Applications are currently open on the website there. You'll see we also have our guide to partnering, which has some more detailed information about exactly what to expect, as well as some questions you should be asking yourself as a site to make sure that you're prepared to take on an AmeriCorps member and get the best of that experience. Our priority deadline is February 18th, but as I said, we are accepting applications on a rolling basis. So provided that we still have sites or slots available, we'll continue to recruit sites in the coming months. And then members start August 29th, 2022. So you can mark that date down as the potential start date if you were to apply and receive a member. And with that, I will open up to questions. One other thing really quick, I am going to put into the chat here a link to a Microsoft form because there was no registration for this meeting. We weren't able to collect email addresses, so either Christina with Green Corps or myself could follow up with you. If you wouldn't mind going to that link really quick and just providing your basic contact information, I'll share that with Christina, and then the two of us will be able to reach out to make sure that you have these links and the information you need if you would be interested in applying for a member.
Well, everyone, I did, if there's anybody on here who is hoping for ISA CEU, there is one available for this session. I see a couple folks have already filled out that form. I just pasted that link there in the chat as well. And let's see if there's any other questions coming through. I won't close this down just yet. We'll make sure and leave things open so that we can get this form made available. But any other questions? I know we're over time here, but I'm happy to field any questions if folks have them. Okay, well, I don't see any questions coming in, so folks are free to log off. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks to all of our speakers for being here. And we'll get these recordings set up and posted.